Hi friends, I hope everyone's doing well. Welcome to another sketchbook session video. I'll link the playlists in the description area if you're interested in watching the other videos in this series. Recently, I've been working through design ideas in my videos. I even created a collage a day in June to see if my art style would change during that time. I would like to continue evolving as an artist and film the process along the way. I hope you're interested in joining me on this journey. For 3 days last week, I worked in my sketchbook hashing out a few design ideas. This is the video of those sessions, so let's get started. I'm using Mod Podge as the adhesive for all the collages. I'll be doing this step mostly off camera to save time. I brought out monoprinted papers in blues and greens for the first collage. Per usual, I pulled more papers than were needed, but I do like to have options. There are all 3 values represented in these papers. I'll be working on the left page first. My loose design idea is similar to the one that I used in my last few videos. I paint a design on top of a collage layer. The painted design is the step that I didn't have fully thought out for this collage. The paper layer I did. It's an overall design that will have all 3 values. Also, I'm being mindful of having elements in different sizes and shapes. Each element will have cut edges as opposed to torn edges. When I was building this layer, I was trying to figure out the paint layer design in my head, so I knew where to place certain papers. Also, I was aware that some of the papers would be covered completely with paint. It's still a good idea to have those paper sections because painting on top of it gives some texture and depth to the design. You may have noticed that I put wax paper behind the pages I'm working on. I do this step to protect as much as possible the other pages in the sketchbook. I don't want the other pages to get stuck together or have paint or pen marks seep through. I didn't glue any of the pages together to thicken them, so the pages are on the thin side. I'll add music as you watch me finish this layer. Once the paper layer was done, the next step was to trim the edges. I wanted to have a good visual of the paper layer so I could see how much surface I had to paint the design on top of it. Instead of using off-white paint as I did for the other similar collages, I brought out this light yellow-orange paint. I still wanted the contrast between the paper and paint layer, so I chose this light value paint. There's also contrast between the cool tone papers and the warm tone paint. I first marked with paint the area that I wanted unpainted, forming a curved shape between the two collage areas. I didn't necessarily want this paint layer to be completely opaque. I like the fact that you can see the outline on the papers underneath. Also, I like the slight color differences in the light orange paint where it's on top of darker papers. I usually don't paint to the gutter of a sketchbook or an art journal because I don't want the paint to seep into the other pages. I lucked out this time because it didn't happen when I painted up to the gutter. Next up, I brought out these two black pens to add some details. I started with a thin nib pen first to add some horizontal lines. I made similar marks on the two previous collages. One had diagonal lines and the other had vertical lines. I wanted to use horizontal lines for this artwork to see how it would look. To enhance the shapes of the collage elements, I'm outlining with a thicker nib pen. I realized that the curved shape between the two collage elements wasn't as pronounced as I would have liked. I brought out orange paint to enhance that curved shape. Once the orange curve shape was how I wanted it, I came back in with the thicker nib black pen to outline the two collage elements again. I wanted to vary the outline thickness a bit so the shapes were more pronounced. Also, I did the similar outline for the orange curve. Now that the first mixed media collage is finished, I moved on to the right page. I'm doing a similar design but with some changes. First, I'll be painting the whole ground in gray. There wasn't much paint left in the bottle, so that's why I applied it directly to the page. I didn't want to waste any of it by adding it to the palette first. I took an end of a thin brush handle to see if I could scrape away some of the paint to create a pattern. It was hot in my studio that day, so the paint dried fast. I did get some squiggly pattern, but it wasn't as much as I wanted. I brought out a white Posca paint pen to add another loose line detail. Here are the monoprinted paper options that I brought out. I love the look of bright colors against gray. This time I'll be creating the collage element before gluing it to the ground layer. I wanted to see if it was easier to do this step first. Also, I wanted to see if I could get the shape I wanted easier. I had the basic size that I wanted, so it helped when cutting the papers to size. I'm using a small amount of Mod Podge to attach the papers together. I'll add music as you watch me finish this layer. I was unsure of the exact shape, so I drew on the back of the collage element with a pencil first before cutting it out. I like the negative element that was cut away, so I'm keeping it to use in a future collage. I put a heavy amount of Mod Podge on the back of the collage element to ensure that it would stick to the ground. Before I outlined the collage element, I wanted to add more color to the ground layer. It looked a bit plain to me. I like the look of a diagonal edge element, so that's how I painted this section with the light lavender paint. I decided not to add any pen details to this section. I thought it would show contrast between the gray painted section with the line details and the solid light lavender painted section. Once the paint dried, I came in and drew black outlines around the collage element like I did in the collage on the left side. After the pen outline was done, I thought this artwork needed another detail, collage papers framing two sides. I like both ways of creating these mixed media collages. It may be helpful sometimes to build the collage elements separately, then glue it to the substrate. Here are the grayscale versions. Both have all three values, but lean heavily towards light to mid-tone overall looking. I worked on these next two collages at the same time. I'm starting by adding old book pages scraps as the first layer for both pages. It's a simple detail, but I thought it'd make this layer more interesting. My design idea for both collages is to have a messy, loose mixed media look. I didn't think it out too much ahead of time, but I wanted each one to have a sparse amount of paint, paper, and pen marks. I'll add music as you watch me finish this layer. I'm using this paint pen with a thick nib to draw a loose design on the left side. Then I'll apply paint on top of it. I will also draw a similar pen marks on the right side, but I'll be applying the paint first. I did it because I was wondering if changing the order of the application would make a big difference in the way the paint and the pen layers look. I'm applying all the paint using an old gift card because I like the way the paint looks when it's applied this way. I'm not covering the whole surface, but being somewhat thoughtful of the placement while leaning into the messy, loose look. To be honest, I don't see too much of a difference between adding the black pen marks before or after the paint layer. It's probably because the paint layer on the left side is somewhat transparent. Since the gray paint on the right side is opaque, so it's heavier looking, I decided it needed more pen details. I'm using a fine point white gel pen to add some circular marks. I brought out my leftover scraps container to pull the collage paper. Since I'm not using too many papers, using scraps is a great way to use them up. I pulled scraps of Thomas Guide maps and street lists, black and white monoprinted and painted papers, and a security envelope for the left side. For the right side, I pulled blue and burgundy scraps. I decided that both collage sections will have a similar design. I'll add music while you watch me finish this layer. This style of mixed media collage is new to my art practice. I know there are many artists that create in a similar style. It's outside my comfort zone, but I'm interested in exploring it further to see if I can make it unique to my way of creating art. Here are the grayscale versions. The one on the left side is very light value leaning. The right side one is more balanced in my opinion. Again, I'll be working on these two pages at the same time. It does make it easier to work this way. While waiting for the paint to dry on one page, you can work on the other. I could use a hairdryer to dry the paint, but if you don't have one handy, this is another way to work around it. Also, if you're stuck on the next move to make on one collage, then you can work on the other one. I kept out the old book to use on the left side. I won't be covering the whole page, just covering around the edges. I'll be using junk mail ephemera for the right side. As you'll see soon, I'm using the ones with the barcodes. At this point, I'll add music and come back for the next step, which is the paint layer. I chose these two colors for the left page because I wanted to match the colors of the book pages. I'm adding some yellow oxide to the off-white to make a light version of the yellow oxide. Once again, I'm using a gift card to apply the paint. While this layer of paint dries, I'm moving to the right side and apply swipes of yellow paint. I will go back to the left side to apply yellow oxide, then back to the right side to apply the next color. Now that the paint layer is completed, I'm building the paper layer. I pulled teal, turquoise, aqua, and yellow painted papers, along with scraps of circular grids and book pages for the right side. For the left side, I pulled an orange monoprinted paper, along with blue, brown, and burgundy scraps. My design idea is to use vertical compositions for both collages. This is a simple composition style that can be complex when you're using a lot of different papers. I'm being mindful of having all three values represented and having different sizes and shapes. Also, I like to have elements that are placed vertically and horizontally within the collage section. I think the design is more interesting with this placement. Once again, I'll add music while you watch me finish both collages. As you noticed when I was building both collages, I pulled a few pieces of paper from the other collages stack. The left collage needed a few small light elements, so I pulled scraps of book pages from the right side stack. The right collage needed a few dark elements, so I pulled brown papers from the stack on the left. I like the contrast of the messy, loose painted ground with the structured vertical collage sections. This is another style that I want to explore further. Here are the grayscale versions. I think both mixed media collages look balanced and cohesive. I hope you got something out of watching me create these mixed media collages. I appreciate you taking time out of your day to watch this video. Take care.